Have you ever found yourself asking the same painful question over and over again? Why does this keep happening to me? Maybe you've escaped one toxic relationship only to find yourself in another. Different face, different personality, different circumstances, yet somehow the emotional dynamic feels strangely familiar. You find yourself giving more than you receive. You make excuses for behavior that hurts you. You try harder when the other person pulls away. You bend yourself into uncomfortable shapes just to keep the peace. And eventually, you're left feeling exhausted, confused, and wondering how you ended up here yet again. At some point, many people begin to ask themselves a troubling question. Why do I keep attracting narcissists? It's a question that has generated countless books, videos, articles, and theories. Some experts will tell you it's because you're empathic. Others will say it's because you're kind, generous, forgiving, or compassionate. While there is certainly truth in those explanations, the famous Swiss psychologist Carl Jung might suggest that something much deeper is taking place. Something hidden, something unconscious, something that has less to do with the narcissist and more to do with the parts of yourself that have been pushed into the shadows. Jung believed that many of our most painful relationship patterns are not random accidents. Instead, they are invitations. Invitations to discover aspects of ourselves that have remained unseen. Invitations to become conscious of what has been operating beneath the surface. And perhaps most importantly, invitations to become whole. Today, we're going to explore Jung's surprising explanation for why some people repeatedly find themselves entangled with narcissistic personalities. We'll examine the concepts of the shadow, the persona, and the unconscious dynamics that can keep people trapped in painful cycles for years. And while what we're about to discuss may feel uncomfortable at times, it may also offer something far more valuable than blame. It may offer freedom. Because according to Jung, the moment we become conscious of what has been unconscious, we begin to reclaim our power. And that changes everything. When most people think about narcissism, they focus almost entirely on the narcissist. They study the narcissist's behavior, the narcissist's manipulation tactics, the narcissist's motivations, the narcissist's wounds. But Jung was rarely interested in looking at only one side of a psychological equation. He understood that relationships are systems. And whenever a pattern repeats itself, there's usually something occurring beneath conscious awareness. This doesn't mean victims are responsible for being mistreated. Let's be very clear about that. Abusive behavior is always the responsibility of the person engaging in it. But Jung would ask a different question. Why does one person walk away from a toxic dynamic almost immediately, while another becomes trapped in it for years? Why do certain relationship patterns seem to repeat themselves across different people and different circumstances? Why does the same emotional story continue to unfold? To answer those questions, we need to begin with one of Jung's most important concepts: the shadow. The shadow is not evil. This is one of the biggest misunderstandings about Jung's work. When people hear the word shadow, they often imagine darkness, cruelty, or destructive impulses. But Jung used the term in a much broader way. The shadow contains everything about ourselves that we've learned to reject. Everything we've been taught is unacceptable. Everything we've hidden in order to gain love, approval, safety, or belonging. Imagine a young child. That child is born whole, naturally expressive, naturally emotional, naturally curious, naturally selfish at times, naturally generous at times, naturally angry, naturally joyful, naturally demanding, naturally vulnerable. But as the child grows, they begin receiving messages from the world around them. Some messages are spoken directly. Others are communicated through reactions, expressions, punishments, and reward. Don't be selfish. Don't be angry. Don't be difficult. Don't be too sensitive. Don't be so emotional. Don't talk back. Don't disappoint people. Be good. Be helpful. Be responsible. Be easy to love. Slowly, the child begins making unconscious decisions. This part of me is acceptable. That part of me is not. This quality gets approval. That quality creates problems. This emotion is welcomed. That emotion is rejected. And so, piece by piece, aspects of the child's authentic self are pushed out of awareness. Not destroyed, not eliminated, simply hidden. These rejected qualities become part of the shadow. And here's the important part. The shadow doesn't only contain negative qualities, it often contains some of our greatest strengths. A child who learns that anger is dangerous may bury healthy assertiveness. A child who learns that speaking up creates conflict may bury confidence. A child who learns that other people's needs always come first may bury healthy self-interest. The qualities themselves are not bad. They simply became associated with danger, and because of that, they were hidden away. This is where many people unknowingly create the foundation for future relationship struggles, because what remains hidden does not disappear. It continues influencing our lives from behind the scenes. Jung famously said that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives and we will call it fate. Think about that for a moment. How often do people describe repeated relationship patterns as bad luck? They say things like, "I always attract narcissists. I always end up with emotionally unavailable people. I always get taken advantage of. I don't know why this keeps happening." Jung would suggest that before calling it fate, we should first explore what might be operating unconsciously. Because often, what appears to be fate is actually a pattern. And what appears to be a pattern is often connected to the shadow. Let's consider someone who spent their childhood learning that being good meant taking care of everyone else. Maybe they became the responsible child in the family. Maybe they learned to anticipate other people's needs. Maybe they became the peacemaker, the helper, the fixer, the caretaker. Everyone praised these qualities. Teachers admired them. Family members relied on them. Friends appreciated them. Over time, these traits became central to their identity. But there was a cost. Every time they ignored their own needs, a piece of themselves went into the shadow. Every time they swallowed resentment, a piece of themselves went into the shadow. Every time they abandoned their own desires to keep someone else comfortable, a piece of themselves went into the shadow. Years later, this person may appear incredibly capable, highly responsible, deeply caring, remarkably dependable. Yet beneath the surface, they may have lost touch with important parts of themselves. Parts that know how to set boundaries. Parts that know how to say no. Parts that know how to prioritize their own well-being. Parts that know how to recognize when enough is enough. And this brings us to one of Jung's most fascinating observations. What we reject in ourselves often fascinates us in others. The person who has buried their own assertiveness may become captivated by someone who appears confident. The person who has buried their own selfishness may become fascinated by someone who unapologetically puts themselves first. The person who has buried their own power may become drawn to someone who seems powerful, not because these people are necessarily healthy, but because they appear to possess something that feels missing, something the unconscious recognizes, something the conscious mind may not fully understand. This is where things begin to get interesting, because before we can understand why narcissistic personalities often exert such a strong pull on certain individuals, we need to understand another Jungian concept: the persona. The persona is the social mask we wear. It's the version of ourselves we present to the world. The word itself comes from ancient theater, where actors wore masks to portray different characters. Jung believed that all human beings develop personas, and this is not inherently a problem. In fact, personas are necessary. You likely have a professional persona at work. You may have a different persona with friends, a different persona with family, a different persona as a parent. These social identities help us function in society. The problem arises when we become so identified with the persona that we forget who we are underneath it. Imagine someone whose entire identity becomes built around being the responsible one, the dependable one, the strong one, the selfless one, the helper, the caretaker. At first, this identity feels rewarding. People admire them, depend on them, respect them, need them. But over time, something subtle begins to happen. The persona becomes less like a tool and more like a prison, because now there is pressure to maintain the image. The responsible one cannot have needs, the strong one cannot fall apart. The helper cannot ask for help. The caretaker cannot stop caring. The peacemaker cannot create conflict. The selfless one cannot prioritize themselves. And so the mask grows heavier. Each year, more energy is required to maintain it. Meanwhile, the rejected parts of the self continue accumulating in the shadow. Resentment, exhaustion, anger, desire, ambition, need, vulnerability. Eventually, the gap between the persona and the authentic self becomes enormous. From the outside, everything may look fine. People may even admire the individual. But internally, something feels off. There is a persistent sense of depletion, a quiet feeling of being unseen, a growing resentment that never quite finds a voice, and perhaps most painfully, a feeling that no one truly knows who they are, because everyone is interacting with the mask, not the person beneath it. This dynamic is particularly common among people who repeatedly find themselves entangled in narcissistic relationships. Because narcissistic individuals often gravitate toward people whose personas are built around service, sacrifice, responsibility, and accommodation. Such individuals have often become experts at minimizing themselves, experts at understanding others, experts at giving the benefit of the doubt, experts at enduring discomfort, experts at carrying emotional burdens. These qualities can be beautiful, but when they become disconnected from boundaries and self-respect, they become vulnerabilities, and vulnerabilities attract attention, not only from healthy people seeking connection, but sometimes from unhealthy people seeking access. The tragedy is that many individuals don't realize what's happening because the dynamic feels familiar. In fact, it may feel normal. It may even feel like love. Because when a persona has been built around earning worth through sacrifice, self-abandonment can begin to feel natural. Giving feels natural. Accommodating feels natural. Enduring feels natural. Overextending feels natural. And this is precisely why these patterns can persist for so long. Not because the person is weak, not because they are foolish, but because the pattern has become woven into their identity, into their persona, into the story they've been telling themselves about who they are. And until that story becomes conscious, it continues running in the background, quietly shaping choices, quietly influencing relationships, quietly determining what feels familiar and what feels uncomfortable. But Jung believed something remarkable. He believed that awareness changes everything. The moment we begin seeing the mask, we create distance from it. The moment we recognize the persona, we stop confusing it with our true self. And the moment we begin exploring the shadow, we start reclaiming the parts of ourselves that have been waiting patiently in the dark. Parts that may hold the key to breaking old relationship patterns. Parts that may hold the key to genuine freedom. The process becomes even more powerful when we understand one of Jung's most transformative ideas, because the qualities we believe we're seeing in other people may not belong to them nearly as much as we think. To understand why certain relationships feel almost magnetic, we need to explore one of Carl Jung's most fascinating psychological concepts. Projection. Projection is happening all around us, all the time, whether we realize it or not. We project onto celebrities. We project onto political leaders. We project onto mentors. We project onto family members. And perhaps most powerfully of all, we project onto the people we fall in love with. Most people think of projection as something negative. For example, a dishonest person accusing everyone else of being dishonest, or an angry person seeing hostility everywhere they go. Those are certainly forms of projection. But Jung believed that some of our most powerful projections are actually positive. We project strength, confidence, wisdom, freedom, power, purpose, beauty, independence. And then we become captivated by the people onto whom we've projected those qualities. Imagine someone who has spent years suppressing their own needs, years putting others first, years avoiding conflict, years worrying about disappointing people. Then they meet someone who appears completely different, someone who speaks their mind, someone who takes up space unapologetically, someone who seems completely unconcerned with what others think. The attraction can feel immediate, intense, almost overwhelming. The person may find themselves thinking, "I've never met anyone like this. They're amazing. They're everything I'm not. They're exactly what I've been missing." But Jung would encourage us to pause here, because sometimes what feels like attraction is actually recognition. Not recognition of another person, recognition of a hidden part of ourselves. What if the confidence you admire in another person is actually your own buried confidence? What if the freedom you admire is your own neglected freedoms? What if the strength you admire is your own strength waiting to emerge? These questions may seem strange at first. After all, if these qualities belong to us, wouldn't we already be aware of them? Not necessarily. Remember, the unconscious mind contains vast amounts of material that remain outside our awareness. Qualities we've suppressed, abilities we've neglected, aspects of ourselves we've never fully developed. Projection allows us to encounter these hidden aspects indirectly. The problem is that we often mistake the reflection for the source. Instead of recognizing the quality within ourselves, we become convinced that another person possesses something essential that we lack. This creates one of the most powerful illusions in human psychology. The illusion that someone else can complete us. The illusion that another person holds the missing piece of our identity. The illusion that our wholeness exists somewhere outside of ourselves. When projection is operating, relationships can feel larger than life. People describe meeting someone and instantly feeling as though they've known them forever. They describe overwhelming chemistry, a sense of destiny, a feeling that fate has finally brought the right person into their lives. And while genuine connection certainly exists, Jung would remind us that intense emotional reactions often deserve careful examination, because projection tends to be strongest at the beginning of relationships. When we know very little about someone, the mind naturally fills in the blanks. And what fills those blanks is often our own unconscious material. We see what we hope to see. We see what we need to see. We see what we long to see. This is one reason so many people look back on past relationships and wonder how they missed obvious warning signs. The signs may have been there, but projection can be remarkably blinding. When we're projecting, we're not relating to the actual person. We're relating to our fantasy of who that person is. We're relating to our own unconscious expectations. We're relating to our own unmet needs. The real person becomes hidden beneath the image we've created. This dynamic becomes particularly important when discussing narcissistic personalities. One reason narcissistic individuals can be so captivating is because they often serve as powerful screens for projection. Many narcissistic people project an image of certainty, strength, confidence, importance, specialness. They appear to know exactly who they are, exactly what they want, exactly where they're going. To someone who feels disconnected from their own confidence or certainty, this can be incredibly attractive. Not because the narcissist is healthy, but because they appear to embody qualities the other person has lost touch with. At first, this can feel exhilarating. The relationship feels exciting, powerful, transformative. The narcissistic individual may seem larger than life. The answer to questions you've been asking for years, the solution to problems you've struggled to solve on your own. The relationship begins to feel extraordinary, different from anything you've experienced before. But over time, something begins to change. Reality slowly starts to emerge. The image becomes harder to maintain. Contradictions appear. Cracks begin forming in the fantasy. The person who seemed confident now appears arrogant. The person who seemed strong now appears controlling. The person who seemed independent now appears emotionally unavailable. The person who seemed special now appears entitled. Many people describe this phase by saying, "They changed." But Jung might ask a different question. Did they change? Or did the projection begin to fade? Because projection is temporary, eventually reality pushes its way through. The actual person begins to emerge. And for many people, this is where confusion begins. The relationship that once felt magical now feels painful. The person who seemed extraordinary now seems deeply flawed. The dream begins colliding with reality, and this collision can be incredibly difficult to navigate, especially when we've invested enormous emotional energy into the image we've created. The situation becomes even more complicated when the relationship fulfills unconscious needs. One of Jung's most important insights was that many unhealthy patterns continue because they serve hidden psychological purposes. This doesn't mean people consciously choose suffering. Far from it. It means the unconscious mind often values familiarity more than happiness. Think about that. Many people assume that human beings naturally seek happiness. But the unconscious mind often seeks what feels familiar, even when familiarity hurts. Someone who grew up earning love through sacrifice may unconsciously feel comfortable in relationships where they are constantly giving. Someone who grew up managing other people's emotions may unconsciously feel drawn to emotionally demanding individuals. Someone who learned their worth depended upon being needed may feel uncomfortable in relationships where nobody needs rescuing. Healthy relationships can actually feel unfamiliar, even boring, not because they're unhealthy, but because they don't activate the old patterns. They don't trigger the old wounds. They don't recreate the emotional environment that feels familiar. This is one reason people sometimes leave one toxic relationship only to enter another. The faces change, the circumstances change, but the unconscious pattern remains the same. Until the pattern itself becomes conscious, it often continues repeating. This realization can feel discouraging at first, but it's actually incredibly empowering because it shifts our attention away from trying to control other people and toward understanding ourselves. We cannot control whether narcissists exist. We cannot control who crosses our path. We cannot control the behavior of other human beings, but we can become aware of our projections. We can become aware of our unconscious patterns. We can become aware of the qualities we've abandoned and the identities we've built around those abandonments. And awareness creates choice. Perhaps for the first time, we begin asking different questions. Instead of asking, "Why do I keep attracting narcissists?" we might ask, "Why was this particular projection created in the first place? Why did certain qualities become hidden? Why did certain needs become disconnected from conscious awareness?" The answer often takes us back to childhood, back to our earliest relationships, back to what Jung referred to as complexes. A complex is an emotionally charged cluster of memories, beliefs, feelings, and experiences that forms around a particular theme. Many of the most powerful complexes develop through our relationships with parents. This is where we encounter what modern psychology often calls the mother wound and the father wound. The mother wound is not necessarily about having a bad mother, nor is the father wound necessarily about having a bad father. Rather, these wounds develop when important emotional needs go unmet during childhood. Sometimes the mother is emotionally unavailable. Sometimes she is overly critical. Sometimes she is overwhelmed. Sometimes she is controlling. Sometimes she is physically present but emotionally absent. The child unconsciously adapts. And those adaptations often continue long into adulthood. A child who receives love only when they are helpful may grow into an adult who believes their worth comes from service. A child who learns that their needs burden others may become an adult who struggles to ask for help. A child who learns that love must be earned may spend decades trying to prove their value. These adaptations can later create the perfect conditions for unhealthy relationships. Not because the person is weak, but because they are still operating from an old survival strategy. The father wound can create similar patterns. A distant father may leave a child desperately seeking approval. An inconsistent father may create anxiety around abandonment. A critical father may create a lifelong fear of failure. An emotionally unavailable father may normalize emotional unavailability in future relationships. Without realizing it, many people spend adulthood trying to resolve childhood wounds through adult relationships. They seek the validation they never received, the approval they never received, the safety they never received, the love they never received. And because these needs are unconscious, they often become attached to people who are least capable of providing them. This is one reason narcissistic relationships can feel so powerful. The relationship is not only occurring in the present, It is also activating the past. The wounded child begins hoping that this time the story will end differently. That this time they will finally be chosen, finally be seen, finally be loved, finally be enough. But healing often begins with a difficult realization. The relationship may not be asking us to work harder for love. It may be asking us to understand what we're still seeking. Because beneath many painful relationship patterns lies a deeper question. What qualities am I searching for outside myself? What am I hoping another person will give me permission to become? What part of my identity depends upon this relationship? What hidden need is being fulfilled? What qualities have I projected onto this person? These questions require courage. Because the answers often challenge the stories we've been telling ourselves, but they also point toward freedom. Because every projection contains a clue, every attraction contains information, every emotional trigger contains a message. The goal is not to judge ourselves for these experiences. The goal is to learn from them, to understand what they reveal, to discover what they are trying to teach us. Because according to Jung, the people who have the greatest impact on our lives are often mirrors. Not necessarily because they reflect who we are, consciously, but because they reveal what remains hidden. They illuminate what has been buried. They expose what has been neglected. And sometimes they point us toward parts of ourselves that are waiting to be reclaimed. The moment we begin reclaiming those lost parts, something remarkable happens. The emotional intensity begins to soften. The obsession begins to loosen. The dependency begins to weaken. We stop asking other people to carry pieces of our identity. We stop expecting others to complete us. And for the first time, we begin the journey toward genuine wholeness. Because the ultimate goal is not to find someone who possesses everything we lack. The ultimate goal is to become so connected to ourselves that we no longer need another person to carry the qualities we've abandoned. That journey is what Jung called individuation, and it is perhaps the most important journey a human being can undertake. If projection pulls us away from ourselves, healing requires the opposite movement. It requires coming home. Coming home to the parts of ourselves we've ignored. Coming home to the qualities we've projected onto others. Coming home to the needs we've spent years pretending we didn't have. Individuation is not about becoming perfect. It is not about becoming enlightened. It is not about eliminating your flaws. Individuation is the lifelong process of becoming whole, of bringing together the conscious and unconscious parts of yourself, of reclaiming what has been lost, of becoming who you truly are rather than who you learned you had to be. Many people spend decades building an identity around survival. They become who they needed to be in order to gain acceptance, who they needed to be in order to feel safe, who they needed to be in order to avoid rejection. But eventually a question begins to emerge. Who am I beneath all of that? Who am I when I'm not performing? Who am I when I'm not pleasing? Who am I when I'm not rescuing? Who am I when I'm not carrying everyone else's burdens? These questions mark the beginning of individuation. And while the journey is beautiful, it is rarely comfortable, because the self you've abandoned does not return quietly. One of the most surprising aspects of healing is that it often feels worse before it feels better. Why? Because the shadow begins to return, the anger you suppressed begins to surface, the resentment you ignored begins to speak, the exhaustion you've been pushing through begins demanding attention. The needs you've denied begin insisting on being acknowledged. At first, this can feel frightening. Many people worry they're becoming selfish. They worry they're becoming cold. They worry they're becoming difficult. But often, what's actually happening is balance. Imagine someone who spent 20 years saying yes when they wanted to say no. The first time they establish a firm boundary, it feels uncomfortable. The first time they disappoint someone, it feels uncomfortable. The first time they prioritize themselves, it feels uncomfortable. Not because it's wrong, because it's unfamiliar. Growth often feels uncomfortable precisely because it takes us beyond what is familiar. Here's something many people don't expect. When you begin changing, not everyone will celebrate. Some people will. Healthy people usually do. But others may become uncomfortable, especially if they benefited from the old version of you. Think about it. If someone has grown accustomed to your unlimited availability, your endless patience, your willingness to absorb responsibility, your habit of putting yourself last, your growth changes the relationship. The unspoken contract is being rewritten. The person who once said yes begins saying no. The person who never complained begins speaking up. The person who carried everything begins setting things down. Not everyone likes that, and that's okay. Because individuation is not about keeping everyone comfortable. It's about becoming authentic. One mistake people often make during healing is swinging from one extreme to the other. After years of overgiving, they decide they'll never trust anyone again. After years of being used, they become emotionally unavailable. After years of weak boundaries, they build walls. But walls and boundaries are not the same thing. Walls keep everyone out. Boundaries determine who gets access. Walls are fear. Boundaries are wisdom. The goal is not isolation. The goal is discernment. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your energy. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your time. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your heart. Learning that is part of maturity. Learning that is part of wholeness. I'd like you to try something. Think about the person who has triggered you the most. Not just annoyed you. Triggered you. The person who created a strong emotional reaction. Now ask yourself, what quality do they possess that creates that reaction? Perhaps they're selfish. Perhaps they're confident. Perhaps they're ambitious. Perhaps they're outspoken. Perhaps they're emotionally detached. Whatever comes to mind, sit with it. Then ask a second question. Where does that quality exist within me? At first, your mind may resist. You may think, I'm nothing like them, and perhaps you're right. But remember, we're not looking for identical behavior. We're looking for hidden energy. Could your resentment toward their selfishness point toward your own neglected self-interest? Could your resentment toward their confidence point toward your own suppressed confidence? Could your resentment toward their freedom point toward your own longing for freedom? Sometimes, the people who trigger us most are pointing toward parts of ourselves that want to emerge. Many people spend years trying to understand the narcissist. Why they behave the way they do, why they manipulate, why they lie, why they lack empathy, why they seem incapable of genuine accountability. While these questions are understandable, Carl Jung would likely suggest a different focus. The more transformative question is, what did this relationship reveal about me? What did it teach me about my wounds? What did it teach me about my boundaries? What did it teach me about my fears? What did it teach me about the parts of myself I've abandoned? Because ultimately, healing is not about becoming an expert on narcissists. Healing is about becoming an expert on yourself. The narcissist may have been the catalyst, but the journey was always about you. A remarkable thing happens when people begin integrating their shadow, when they begin reclaiming their projections, when they begin living authentically rather than through their persona. The pattern starts to break. Not because narcissistic people disappear from the world, but because the unconscious invitation disappears. The dynamic no longer feels familiar. The red flags become visible earlier. The discomfort is noticed sooner. The need to rescue begins to fade. The compulsion to prove your worth begins to weaken. You stop chasing. You stop over-explaining. You stop negotiating your value. And perhaps, most importantly, you stop abandoning yourself. For many people, this is the first time they've ever truly experienced freedom. Not freedom from difficult people. Freedom from the unconscious patterns that kept drawing them toward those people. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Many people believe their relationship patterns are fate. Bad luck, a curse, an unfortunate coincidence. Jung believed something different. He believed our patterns are messengers. He believed our struggles contain lessons. He believed the people who impact us most profoundly often reveal aspects of ourselves that remain hidden. And while that realization can be uncomfortable, it is also deeply empowering. Because if the pattern was created unconsciously, it can become conscious. If it can become conscious, it can change. And if it can change, then your future does not have to look like your past. The goal is not to become harder. The goal is not to become colder. The goal is not to become someone else entirely. The goal is to become whole, to reclaim the parts of yourself you've hidden, to integrate the qualities you've projected, to remove the masks you've mistaken for your identity, and to finally recognize that what you've been seeking in others has been waiting within you all along. And remember, the path to freedom is not found in changing other people. It is found in knowing yourself. Many psychological discussions stop at awareness. They help us understand the pattern. But awareness alone is rarely enough. The question eventually becomes, what do we actually do with this information? How do we begin integrating the shadow? How do we reclaim our projections? How do we become whole? Jung believed that transformation begins with consciousness, not perfection, consciousness. The first practical step is learning to notice your emotional triggers. The next time someone creates a strong emotional reaction, pause before immediately judging the situation. Ask yourself, why is this affecting me so deeply? What exactly am I reacting to? What story am I telling myself about this person? What does this remind me of? Often our strongest reactions reveal something important about ourselves. Not because the other person is innocent, but because the intensity of our reaction frequently points towards something unconscious. The second practice is keeping a shadow journal. Whenever you find yourself strongly criticizing someone, write down the qualities that bother you. Are they selfish, controlling, confident, ambitious, attention-seeking? Then ask yourself a surprising question. Where might a healthier version of that quality exist within me? Remember, shadow work is not about becoming selfish. It may be about developing healthy self-interest. It is not about becoming controlling. It may be about developing healthy boundaries. The goal is not imitation. The goal is integration. The third practice is learning to tolerate disappointment. This sounds simple, but it can be life-changing. Many people remain trapped in unhealthy relationships because they cannot tolerate someone else's disappointment. The moment another person becomes upset, they rush to fix it. Explain, apologize, accommodate, negotiate, overfunction. But healing sometimes requires allowing people to be disappointed, allowing people to misunderstand you, allowing people to disagree with you, and realizing that their discomfort is not an emergency. The fourth practice is asking a powerful daily question: what do I need right now? For some people, this question feels surprisingly difficult. They know what everyone else needs. They know what their children need, their spouse needs, their co-workers need, their friends need. But they rarely stop to ask what they need. Beginning this practice can slowly reconnect you with parts of yourself that have been ignored for years. The fifth practice is reclaiming small acts of authenticity, not dramatic changes. Small ones. Express an opinion you would normally keep to yourself. Say no when you genuinely mean no. Ask for help when you need it. Take a break without justifying it. Rest without earning it first. These small moments send a message to the unconscious mind. My needs matter too. My voice matters too. I matter too. And perhaps most importantly, practice becoming curious instead of judgmental. Many people approach their wounds with criticism. They ask, "What's wrong with me? Why do I keep doing this? Why can't I just move on?" But Jung's work invites a different approach. Curiosity. What is this pattern trying to teach me? What part of myself is asking to be seen? What wisdom is hidden inside this struggle? Because the goal is not to wage war against yourself. The goal is to understand yourself, and understanding is where transformation begins. If this message resonated with you, consider subscribing to The Sovereign Path.